So what is applied artificial intelligence? Well, the meaning applied means that you can actually use it in real life. It's the opposition of theoretical, as we see it at least. And that's what we do. We don't have 2,000 programmers. We don't work on a new core technology that will be available in 10 years. We're more going after point solutions. We're looking at real problems that we want to solve with our technology, with the partners that we have. So that's why we call it applied. And we're going to go into detail about that. So if we looked into the old school of applied AI, this is not really AI, it's more logic, but it's been around for quite a while. These decision support systems been around since the 70s. I don't think they're used today. They're being replaced, but we can see that even with very easy to grasp logic, like if and then, you could capture a lot of the knowledge of a physician and you can put that into a system. Some of these systems were actually based on the knowledge of just one doctor. So they picked out this bright doctor that knew everything about the disease, and they sort of took all the knowledge he had into a system, and that would sort of help the others that were younger. And I think that's great because they can be so efficient in how they convey knowledge to those who are still learning. And this is what you can do with really simple technology. So these were a little bit the early stage of applied AI, I would say. How many of you here are very familiar with artificial intelligence? Oh, there's a few, great. For those of you who are not, you may be wondering, what is he talking about? AI, it sounds very sexy, but I don't know much about it. So let's just have a little bit of an overview of the timeline here. So Alan Turing is said to be one of the key people in AI. As with any inventions, there are many people that should be noted, but he did something extraordinary. He created the automatic machine in 1936, and that was a mechanical device, but it could have an algorithm, and it could manipulate things, and it could look at symbols on a strip of tape, and it could identify that, and whatever you threw at it, it would understand it. So it could simulate the logic of any algorithm. So that was sort of the birth of AI, if you will. And then in the 50s, there were quite a bit of work, but Alan Turing's work led up to these code-breaking machines during the Second World War. I think to a large degree actually helped defeating the Nazis by intercepting their messages before, so you could anticipate their next move. And then formally in 1956, it was founded as a standalone academic field. And before that, Marvin Minsky and Dean Edmonds, they built the first neural net machine. That was sort of the inception of AI. And during the 50s, everything was possible, and there was an era with a lot of confidence and so forth. So there came a lot of money into AI, and that sort of helped building the natural language and the ELIZA, the first chatterbot, really back 50 years ago. And then we also had a vision of Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick in the movie that they wrote. And then DARPA and MIT, they poured money into this, and that sort of gave a little bit of result. And I think that the results sort of didn't really come as fast as one hoped for due to the limitation of memory of the computers back then. You couldn't really handle large data sets, so you couldn't really do wonders with it. You couldn't really apply it to anything. So it's still pretty much a theory. And in the 80s, there come some expert systems, especially the XCON, that could serve as a decision support system for company and save millions of dollars. So that sort of gave a little bit light, and once again, it came a little bit more funding. And then there's been a couple of winters of AI where no one really wanted to be connected to artificial intelligence. So the people that worked with artificial intelligence, they would say they worked with computational intelligence or advanced analytics, because it was sort of considered that you were a little bit of a dreamer if you worked with artificial intelligence, because it didn't really lead to anything. And then there were some breakthroughs again with serious funding in Japan, the US, and the UK. And 1988, I think, was a little bit of an important year for AI, because it was the incorporation of a lot of mathematical tools in AI that we still see today, Markov models and Bayesian models and so forth. And then, of course, after the second winter in the end of 1980s and early 1990s, it's just been a success story of artificial intelligence. And the Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in chess, and one could claim that, well, chess is a very logical game. It's defined by a number of rules. You can't break the rules, and you can brute force the game by doing a lot of calculations, obviously, and humans can't think of that many steps in advance that a computer can. So it was considered an easy test for artificial intelligence. But anyway, it's sort of gave a little confidence to it, and then also IBM Watson completed the Jeopardy win in 2011, and that showed a little bit what you can do with learning a lot of facts through natural language processing and so forth. And also, the first autonomous car that drove 55 miles is another token of what you can actually do with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And if we look a little bit ahead, it is said that in 2029, artificial intelligence will surpass human knowledge and intelligence. That's really, really fascinating. If you just let that sink in, we just don't know where we will be. And then also the talk of singularity and whether that is benign or if it's malicious. I don't think we have an idea, but there are certainly a lot of people speculating about it. So that's a little bit an overview, the way we see artificial intelligence in history. Now, we talked about applied artificial intelligence, and the opposite would be the schoolbook artificial intelligence, which tend to be focusing on algorithms. You have no live deployment because you just do your analytics and you do your algorithms. There is no feedback. There's no user. And obviously you don't have any monitoring of the performance of your system, and you usually don't have any pre-processing of data. If the data is nice and you can work with it. And also you don't have the processing cycle time requirement. You don't need to upload the data from someplace, then do your analytics and then send back a message. So we have a minimal feedback, and you have very little focus on feature extraction. We work very much with feature extraction, so quite an opposite there. And also there's very little focus on various data source combinations because it's a theoretical exercise, not a practical one. And finally, very little focus on heuristics. And heuristics is very, very important when it comes to healthcare, as we see it. We often would like to go wild and crazy with our solutions, but the physicians that we work with and the lawyers tend to hold us back. So if we take an example of an applied artificial intelligence solution, we can look at my spam box in my email, and there's quite a bit of emails there. I just looked at it briefly today, and I haven't done it before unless I was looking for something. And I found about 200 emails. I think they were all from the last week. And these are emails that are not wanted by me. So gratefully, there is this program that pulls them away from me. And this is interesting. If you look at the accuracy here, I'm not sure you can read it here, but these are sort of marketing related. This is from Unilever. They're trying to, Procter & Gamble, I think. Well, doesn't matter. They're trying to get me to try some detergent anyway. And most of these emails are something I should try a new product, or I should sign up for a magazine, everything that's not interesting to me. And my email client sort of has learned that, well, Mattias, he never reads these emails, and if he opens them, and he discards them immediately, he never responds to them. He's not interested in this, so we can classify them as spam. And that's really great, but when you think about it, I have never been in the position where I found an email that I really wanted in this folder. So it's very precise. Obviously, I do get some spam that enter my normal inbox, but it's really nice to be able to rely on something like this. And that's often the case that we meet with our solutions too. There is no acceptance for errors. We also have to deliver solutions that are waterproof in that aspect. So what does it look like? Well, there is I borrowed this from Lars. He's composed this. I think it's really nice. So this is a typical machine learning pipeline. And as figures 1 and 2, we have data sets. We can take one or two or several, could be many different data sets. And then we do pre-processing. And what is pre-processing? Well, that is that we manipulate data in some way. So when we look at data, it's usually not a perfect world. There are missing values, for instance. Often we work with time series, and there could be a large quantity of data, and we want to do an extraction. We might be interested in a certain point in the timeline where there's a sort of leading up to an event that we're studying that we want to predict something. So we spend a lot of time doing the pre-processing, the computerization itself, where the computers analyze the data. It doesn't take very long time. But the pre-processing, the transformation of data, that takes time, and that's a science in itself. So once we have the transformed data that we've been working on, then we use that data. We actually we take the data and we divide it into two parts. We have the training set, which we use for developing our tools. And then we have the test set that we use for validation. And the reason that we do that is that we don't want to have any bias or what we call overfitted systems. So we tailor our solutions to the data, and it doesn't work on other data. And we use the validation for that. And once we have worked around with the predictive model and we're happy with it, with the tools that we selected, obviously here and here you have hundreds of different models that you can select. So it's a bit of an optimization of what tools to use. Then we have the predictive model. And then we take unseen data, usually from the same source. I mean, if we're doing predictions of sudden cardiac arrest and we want to look at patients that are likely to have sudden cardiac arrest, we don't want to look at data about sales of oranges or anything. So it has to be similar. And then we use the predictive model, and then we do the prediction, and we have a validation of that too. And then we can use statistics, and we can see what kind of accuracy we have. We can have confidence interval. You can make a bigger group if you really want to detect all, as you did with the spam filter, allowing for some spam to pass into the inbox. If you have questions, you're free to interrupt me. Otherwise, we can take it later. It's fine either way. So this is a little bit the setup of the pipeline. And where can we find these solutions? Well, you can find them anywhere, and I would say healthcare is not the dominant. For instance, in banking, you will find it in operations. You will find it in financial transactions, especially on the stock market. You can find it in a gearbox at Volkswagen. You can find it in customer service. You can do predictions there. You can do optimizations there. Obviously, search engines, that's very common. And aircraft, basically today as a pilot, you can get on an aircraft and you can just sit with your arms crossed and you can start and you can take off and you can fly overnight on a red-eye flight, and then you can land, and then you can just leave the aircraft without actually doing anything. The computers will do everything for you. So that's the technology today. The media, that surprised me when I learned it, that today most of the media, or much of the media, is actually written automatically. It's no person writing it. It's just pure automatic. And for instance, there's this company called EasyUp, and they have commercialized a natural language generation technology. And they apply it, and they apply reasoning to data. So they can write articles, reports about 3,000 pages per second. And sports reporting, for instance, you have an artificial intelligence solution, looks for a result after a hockey game or a softball game or a baseball game, can download the data, the metadata about the game, can go into a database, acquire the pictures from that game, and then write an article and publish the article. It's all automatic. So that sort of opens up what can you do with that kind of technology. You can do lots of things. So that's a little bit, and also I didn't actually talk about the lung cancer detection. That's probably the strongest point for artificial intelligence in healthcare. It's been the CPath, with technology for detecting lung cancer, and it's been very efficient. So it has an accuracy of over 90% compared to physicians that are only averaging 50%. So that's a good way of using the technology. So. Sure.
What is the relationship between artificial intelligence and machine learning?
Well, machine learning, I would say, is one technology of artificial intelligence. So it's what we call supervised. So, for example, for autonomous driving, you could film the street ahead of a car, and you could teach the computer what the road looks like. You could teach it how traffic signs are, what they do. You can teach it what a cyclist looks like, what an intersection looks like. And when the computer has enough data, it will learn and it will see patterns over time. So the more data you feed it into it, it will learn that. So that's machine learning is one application of artificial intelligence, a very common application. The other one is unsupervised, where, for instance, in the creation of Google Brain, Google, they just collected a lot of cat videos, and then they just subjected the the AI to cat videos. They didn't say anything about cat. They didn't specify cats. They just provided a lot of pictures of cats. And then the system in itself has sort of developed a natural intelligence. Hey, these pictures sort of look the same. They are furry animals. They have 2 eyes. They have this nose. And then it sort of learned and classified a cat by itself. So those are 2 main ways to deal with artificial intelligence. Happy with that for now?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, transformation of healthcare. This is really what brought me into this, because healthcare, as I see it, and many I think would agree with me, is in chaos right now. We will never be able to provide healthcare to the population the way we're going now, because the costs are rising and the demographic is just beating us. And if we look at this, sort of, we're focused on the United States. This is the United States, and I labeled it Ebberöd Bank. How many people are not familiar with Ebberöd Bank? Well, there are some people here, yeah. So Ebberöd Bank, that was actually a Danish, I looked into it, but I just heard about Ebberöd Bank. What is that? Well, it's a bank that sort of takes money from you, and I give you 8% interest, and then you borrow money from me, and you pay 4%. So I go bankrupt very, very quickly. And it was a Danish film, actually, with the term. And this is exactly what is happening with the healthcare. We can see the healthcare spending is increasing, and if you're aware of the deficits in most countries today, it is a deficit. So we can't keep on borrowing for spending at healthcare. It's just not going to be working. And if we look at the demographics, they're not in our favor either. This is the US population, and we can see that now we have like about 14-15% of the population are 65 years and older, and then 2030 will be 20%. And looking at, for instance, China, they had a one-child policy. They started in the 80s of that, and the population has just continued rising, and it will continue rising for quite a long time. So if we look at the population of Earth, right now we're 7 billion people. Even if we just from today on started to just populate at whatever rate we're at, so every 2 parents would have 2 kids, we would still ending up with 11 billion people, because it's already in the works. So we will need to do something. So that's sort of the demographics and the financials. And then if we look at the diseases, and I took the sugar as a token of that, because the sugar consumption sort of dictates a little bit about obesity, diabetes, cancer, and these sort of precursors for other diseases too. We can see that this is not a very good situation that we're facing. And actually, the prevalence of these diseases are rising too. Cancer, type 2 diabetes is really critical. We work with physicians that say, well, we have kids now 4 years old coming in, and they are labeled as age diabetes. We can't talk about age diabetes anymore, so we have to relabel it. We label it diabetes type 2 because it's not connected to age anymore. So that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. And you can see the United States here, of course, is really not doing very well at all. And there's actually been an investigation into the health of the United States. And they looked at the population, and then they concluded how many are considered healthy of the population. Can we have a guess? How many are considered healthy in the United States? 40%? Another 20%. Actually, it's less than 10. Yeah. So how do you customize a healthcare for a population that is mostly sick? How do you do that? That's hard. The way we view healthcare is a little bit like the manual switchboard for phones in the 50s. It's really nice. These former housewives, they brought their bags and their woolen sweaters to work, and they were sitting there and they were connecting these calls manually. So Mrs. Smith is calling and she wants to call her doctor. Now you can plug this in. She wants to call the butcher. You can plug that in. So all very manual. And if you look at the other industries, banking, airline, and so forth, they're pretty much automated throughout. But when we come to healthcare, that's not the case. A large part of the healthcare is still very, very manual. For instance, diagnostics. If I'm sick, I go to the primary care unit. I spend maybe 5 minutes with a physician. In those 5 minutes, I have to account for every signal or every symptom of my disease. and I have to convey that to the physician. The physician has to understand it and then make a decision resulting in some kind of drug, usually. That's very, very much a manual step. Also, if I take a drug, I go to one primary care unit, physician, I get one drug, then I go to my specialist, I get another drug, and I see a lot of different people that are all connected to my health, but they are not connected to each other. They can't even read my journal, the same journal. So if you go to Region Skåne, for instance, there are many different versions of the electronic health records. They don't interoperate, so they use predominantly fax machines to fax journals back and forth, which makes it a little bit cumbersome. If I'm sitting in your office and you want my data now, you can't have it. And then you have to make decisions on the few minutes that you see me, which is not very good way of making decisions. So that is a problem. Obviously, it's changing now. You have big electronic health records like companies like Epic and Cerner, and they're moving into a much more modern infrastructure. But there's going to be this legacy problem for quite a while, especially here in Region Skåne, unfortunately. So that's something also. And now in our industry, we see the advent of nurse care management platforms, and they are more or less an extension or a digitalization of this field here. They don't really connect with the diagnostics that way. So there's a need for change the way we see it here. And there's still great potential because now, today, many people like you here, well, people have a cell phone. I've seen many cell phones here today. And many of you also have wearables, like the Fitbit or the Jawbone, or maybe you have something else, a device that you carry around all the time that measures and tracks your activity, and maybe you have a GSR, the skin response, maybe it measures your stress, whatever. You aggregate a lot of data that you store in the cloud that could be helpful for healthcare. We already have seen the first prototypes for nanobots, and it's speculated and forecasted that in 10 years, we will have nanobots in our brains that will be able to connect to the cloud. So when we need more memory modules, we can just connect to that. And obviously, they can check our status in various fields. They can send information all the time. So the quality of data and the quantity of data goes up, and it will continue to go up. And that's good news if you're interested in big data and artificial intelligence, because it's sort of happy days. So we can do a lot of things, and we're going to do a lot of things in the future. And if we're going to expand the vision really, 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 really hard, we have seen that FDA has now approved the first 3D printed drug. So you can actually print your own drugs at home. Isn't that convenient? You get a printer and then you print whatever you need. In the long run, using the technology from EasyOp with the printing and looking at companies like 23andMe, where they gather a lot of gene data, you can sequence that data, and then you can come up with new compounds that will be helpful for diseases. If someone would like to do this, say the Gates Foundation, for instance, and they would put a computer at work, the computer could analyze all potential kind of combinations for compounds. It could publish them online automatically, and then just destroying the pharmaceutical industry in a couple of years. There would be no more patents to have. The pharmaceutical industries wouldn't be able to make patents, then they couldn't spend and invest billions in people and in making drugs and making that available. And instead, we would have printers at home with these compounds. So if you became sick, for instance, then we don't hope you will, but maybe, we never know. Then you could have a printer, or your community could have a printer, and you could go there and you could send your data to software, can analyze your data, can come up with the precise compound that you need, which is unique for you, and the rest of us may have the same disease and we will not have the same pill, but you will have a unique pill. And then there's no producer of that drug anymore, because you have used the software, and the FDA is, what can they do about it? They can't really, it would kill an industry, and it would be a birth of a new way of things. So it sounded like a vision, but it could happen in 5 to 10 years. So where do we fit in here? What do we do? Well, we go after point solutions, and right now we're focused on dialysis. And the dialysis industry is also in change. Not so much here in Europe or in Asia, but in the United States. And this has sort of come out of the Affordable Care Act, where the United States realized that okay, we have the most expensive healthcare in the world, and our population is getting older, and we have this deficit, so we can't pay for it. We need to do something. And also, we want to provide our care to more people with the Obamacare. We need to do something. So in dialysis, which is very costly, they said, okay, we're going from this concept here, which is DRG, where you have diagnosed related group. So if you're my patient, you come in, I give you dialysis, I charge you for that. Then you're going to have EPO, I charge you for that. You're going to have vitamins, I charge you for that. And then you're going to have another lab test, I charge you for that. And whatever I sell, I just charge you. And then there's an overhead on everything. So I make a profit. It's just a scale of economies. And then and this is the governmental program, CMS, they said, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to pay a flat rate. $250. And not only are we going to pay $250, we're going to lower it. So now it's going to be down to $235. And if you don't keep the quality of your patients, we're going to punish you even further. And you just have to live with that. And by the way, drugs are going to be included in that. So then in one night, you change the financials of the dialysis industry, where it's become super important to look at other parameters. So you have time for new rules. You have data-triggered health interaction. Because in the upcoming landscape, and it started now in October, you have ESCOs, which is End-Stage Renal Disease Seamless Care Organization, which is really, really nice that they have an abbreviation for that, which is called ESCO. So a dialysis clinic can get paid if their patients stay out of hospitals. So they have incentives to keep their patients really, really well. And then you really want to have data about the patients so you can make predictions when they're going to become ill. You want to do preventive measures. You want to have personalized medicine. You really want to see, okay, do you need this much EPO? EPO is the most expensive drug in the US healthcare economy, so we want to cut that down. How can we cut your EPO down and still keep you in the good range of your hemoglobin level? That's what you want to look at. So the result is optimized contextual personalized medicine. What is the right level of EPO for you this week? And that's what we're going after. And then to make matters even more complicated, this is a typical end-stage renal disease patient. They're not only having end-stage renal disease. They also often have diabetes, hypertension, anemia. They could have fatty liver disease and iron deficiency. So you sort of have to take that into account too. And we humans are not very good at looking at more than 2 or 3 variables at a time. So at dialysis clinics, these physicians, they go around with calculators trying to calculate everything, and it's just a mess. Right. The questions are just piling up, I think. All right, so what if I'm a data scientist and I've got a dedicated team of programmers and I really, really want to go into healthcare and I want to make a change, I'm committed to this. Well, is this something that sounds really promising? I should just leap in and do it. Yeah, that's what I think too. But there are a few things here that you might want to keep in mind. So I made a comparison. So Expert Maker is in the retail and we're in healthcare. Let's just compare the two a little bit. So for both of us, we need a profitable business deal. Every project that we undertake is not going to be successful. And it's not only due to our competence, because the data might not be predictive enough. The data might not be enough. It might not be legal. There will be many reasons why our projects can fail. But at least there needs to be a profitable business deal. If we spend a lot of money developing tools here, and there needs to be someone who will buy it for something so we can get that money back. Otherwise, it's hard being a business. And that's the same for Expert Maker. Then in terms of data, if you sell services to big corporations like Safeway or Starbucks or Home Depot, these retail organizations, they typically are one organization. They have one computer system. They have one database. And they scan all their products that they sell. There you go. If you've been in the retail industry, you know you can get data about everything. So you get that data about everything. And you can pinpoint your purchase behaviors maybe back into the 80s if you've been a loyal customer. So there's plentiful of data. And it's structured. And most of it's machine collected too, because it's collected at the till. So every time you buy something, you swipe the product automatically. You don't have to put it in yourself. Whereas in the healthcare, usually all the data comes from someone plugging it into the system. Could be a nurse, could be a doctor. And there are errors there. Maybe the blood pressure wasn't 155, maybe it was 135. Who are we to know? And there are missing data, and it's unstructured. It's often in silos. It could be 10 different places looking very, very differently. So it's hard to access the data. You have to look for places where it's easier. And then you have the HIPAA, which is the American equivalency to PUL, personuppgiftslagen, for those of you aware of that. And that's kind of a little bit of a hurdle. You have to have a patient consent. You have to have a good reason to collect the data that you do and so forth. And I would say that's severe in healthcare. In retail, it's mild. And then you need the patient consumer consent. So if you're a customer at ICA and you use their card, you sign something in the beginning and then you usually never think about it. You could be a customer for 50 years. You sign one thing once. Whereas in healthcare, you have to sign it every time it's a new data acquisition. So that's a little bit more difficult there. And here, the computer inspection, data inspection, maybe they're not so hard. This is sensitive data here on the healthcare side, so it's going to be harder. Then if you want to prove that your system actually works, if you make a decision support system or you make a prediction system or an optimization system, you can't just start selling and claiming and say, this is the best dialysis app in the world, because then Läkemedelsverket or FDA will come down on you like a ton of bricks. Where's your data? Where's your proof? What's your evidence here? So the evidence, you need the ethical committee approval, then you need to make a study, you need to have a quality management system and so forth, and you also need to look into the patient data law, so you don't violate that. For instance, if you gather data about yourself, I can't own that data. And well, I wouldn't bore you with all of them, but if you move data, for instance, from New York to Houston because you have your server there, and then you do your analytics and then you move it back, then just transferring the data is a medical device. So that's something that you need to look into too. You have the CISA compliance too, which is the Cyber Act. And that's beginning to get some more recognition too, because identity theft is a thing in itself. I think the going rate for a credit card information is between 50 cents to $3. Whereas if you steal the identity, it's between $500 and $1,000. So that's something that you are obliged to look into. And the reason for that is that, especially in the United States, where you have insurance covering your health care, if I say I need a kidney transplant and I don't have the money for it, maybe I want to pay someone $500 to get another person's identity, and then I can go into the hospital and have my transplantation and pay only $500 instead of $45,000 or $50,000. Also, the quality management system, ISO 9000, you need to prove evidence that it's working. Typically, you need to do a clinical trial where you show that your device is actually working. So that's the regulatory compliance. And then you also need something that's called reimbursement. So reimbursement is very interesting. Whereas if you go to Home Depot and you say, okay, let's look at your data here and we can make predictions, or we can make really good offers for your customers that will make them come into your store more often. You will sell more. Then it's a straight business case. You show them the slides, this is working, they want to pay for it. Here you have to find reimbursement. Either that or you save the clinic money. And reimbursement is not that easy. It's like if you come up with a good medical device, for instance. Let's say you have a machine that will predict cancer. Then can you go to Region Skåne and sell that? Well, no, because it's not reimbursed. So then you need to do some lobbying, maybe at state level, maybe local level, and you need to have a code for that. You need to have a code for the disease, and you need to have a code for reimbursement. So when the purchasing is doing, they're going to have a public tender, and they're going to say, okay, now we have a public tender for this cancer detection system, and then you will be one of the vendors. But unless there's a reimbursement, you can't really sell to anyone. They can take it on their operating budget, but that won't last forever. So that's another big hurdle, I would say. And then finally, you have the patient consumer liability. So for instance, if you have a decision support system for physicians about drug administration for a diabetic or dialysis patient, and you violate the recommendation of the drug manufacturers, then the patient might die, and the patient will sue someone. It will first sue the doctor, and if that's not successful, which it won't be because it's not the doctor's fault, then it will sue the hospital. and the hospital say, well, we didn't have anything to do, it was these guys from lytics there. So then they go to lytics and then they sue us, and if we don't have any money, then they will go to me or the board. So you need an insurance there, and you need to pay attention to the liability too. That's important. So a few hurdles, I would say, with applied artificial intelligence in healthcare, but overall, I see it personally. I've been in this industry now with artificial intelligence. I see it as a drag race, really, where you're going full speed, but you don't know when the 400 meters are up, because the industry in itself is in a flux, and right now there's not I mean, we're not really competing with Microsoft. We're not really competing with IBM. They're much bigger than we are, but we're with both stakeholders in the industry, and we know that they don't make any money, and they're pursuing their clients just like we are. So it's a little bit of a race, but we don't know when the finish line is going to be. And since everything is in a flux, we don't really know what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years. We have to make a little bit decisions what we believe. We have to go with our hearts. So it's a leap of faith, I believe, to be in this industry.